All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down one of the oldest, one of the simplest, and yet one of the most powerful vulnerabilities in the entire history of computers, the buffer overflow.
And really, it all boils down to this one question. How is it possible? It sounds kind of crazy, but a single tiny mistake like this has been the secret key for some of the biggest and baddest cyber attacks we have ever seen.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get our heads around the basic idea. Then we'll look at a simple code example to see it in action. After that, we'll see how it gets weaponized, check out its wild history, and finally, look at the digital arms race it created. Okay, so let's get right into it. At its heart, a buffer overflow is a surprisingly simple idea. Just think about trying to pour a whole gallon of juice into a tiny coffee mug. It's going to spill everywhere, right? That's kind of what's happening here.
You see, the key thing to remember is that a buffer is really just a container in memory with a fixed size. The overflow is what happens when a program tries to stuff way too much data into that container. And that extra data, it doesn't just vanish. Nope, it spills out and starts corrupting whatever just happened to be stored right next to it.
Let's make this super clear with a really good visual. And hey, you don't need to be a programmer to get this, I promise. This is all about what happens when you try to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag.
So picture this in your head. This is a tiny snapshot of a computer's memory. We've got two things sitting right next to each other. First is A, an 8-byte box meant to hold a word. Right next to it is B, a much smaller box holding the number 1979. See? Everything is in its proper place.
Okay, but here's where the problem kicks in. The program tries to copy the word excessive into that first box, A. Now, you might already see the issue. The box can only hold 8 characters, but excessive has 9. It's just one tiny byte too big.
And boom, here's what happens. The first 8 letters, excessive, they fit perfectly into box A. But that last letter, that final E, it has nowhere to go. So it just spills over and overwrites the space that belonged to box B. And just like that, B is no longer 1979. It's been completely scrambled into this totally random number, 25,856.
Okay, so that was an accident, right? A simple bug. But what happens if someone causes this overflow on purpose? Well, that is exactly where a simple programming mistake transforms into a seriously powerful weapon.
So instead of overflowing the buffer with a word like excessive, an attacker very carefully crafts a special string of data. This string isn't just letters, oh no. It's actually a tiny malicious program, what we call shellcode, and it's designed to do one thing: give them complete control.
Now, these attacks usually happen in one of two places in memory. First, you've got the stack. Think of it like a neat stack of plates for temporary short-term tasks. It's very fast and organized. Then you have the heap, which is more like a big messy closet for data that needs to hang around for a while. You can attack both, but that classic stack-based attack is the one we're going to focus on.
Now this is the really clever part. This shows the hijack step by step. You see, on that stack, there's this critical piece of data called a return address. It's basically a bookmark that tells the program, hey, after you finish this job, go back here. The attacker's overflow writes over that bookmark and replaces it with the address of their own malicious code. So when the program finishes its job and looks for the bookmark, whoops, it's been tricked into jumping straight to the attacker's code instead. Game over.
And believe me, this isn't some brand new cutting-edge technique, oh no. This has a long, long history. And if you understand it, you can see why it's been such a stubborn problem for the internet.
Just look at this timeline. The basic idea was understood all the way back in 1972. But then, in 1988, the Morris worm showed the whole world just how destructive it could be. A few years later, a legendary paper came out that basically gave everyone a how-to guide. And then, by 2003, you had worms like SQL Slammer using this exact trick to cause total chaos at lightning speed. 75,000 servers in 10 minutes. That's insane.
So to make sure their attacks actually work, hackers came up with this really slick trick called a NOP sled. Right before their malicious code, they put a long, long string of instructions that literally tell the computer to do nothing. It creates this kind of long, slippery landing strip. That way, even if they don't get the program to jump to the perfect spot, it doesn't matter. It'll just land somewhere on that do-nothing slide and just coast right on down to the real malicious part of the code. It's brilliant in a scary way.
So obviously, with a threat this big, the good guys didn't just sit around and do nothing. What followed was a decades-long arms race. with attackers finding new ways to exploit this bug and engineers building smarter and smarter defenses to shut them down.
And what we have today is this really cool multi-layered defense. The best defense, really, is just using modern programming languages that handle all this memory stuff for you. But for older code, we've got these clever tricks. Stack canaries, for example. They're like little invisible tripwires. If an overflow messes with the tripwire, the program knows something's wrong and can shut down. Modern operating systems also help out by making it impossible to run code from certain parts of memory, and by constantly shuffling everything around, making the attacker's target incredibly hard to hit.
When you boil it all down, this entire story is about a fundamental battle. On one side, you've got simple human error, which is just going to happen when you're writing millions of lines of code. And on the other side, you've got the incredible creativity of attackers who are absolute masters at turning one tiny mistake into a massive security breach.
And that really leaves us with this one big final thought. We've built all these amazing defenses for sure, but our technology, our phones, our cars, our homes, it's getting more and more complex every single day. So are we just creating more and more places, more dark corners, for these really old, really dangerous bugs to hide? Something to think about. Thanks for joining.